Hey, Pat's Personal Portraits. Oh, really? Yes, it's another one of those fascinating segments in which you get a chance to meet somebody that you never knew who has a fascinating life, or you meet somebody that's very familiar that has some fascinating things to tell you about his life, like Al McCoy, Williams, Iowa. Where is that?
That's about 50 miles north of Des Moines, just off the world-famous I-35 and the home of the Boondocks truck stop.
One memory of KJFJ, Webster City, your first radio station.
Well, I just had an opportunity to visit just a few weeks ago. I hadn't done that for a long time.
The radio station?
The radio station in Webster City. And a couple of the guys were on the air, and they got all excited, and I went on the air with them for about 45 minutes, and it was the most fun that I've had in a long, long time. But it was my first job in broadcasting, and we had a lot of fun. It was entertaining, but it was very, very educational as well.
I could just picture one of the citizens, the seniors
Right.
of Webster City saying, Martha, I told you he'd be back.
Right.
He wasn't going to be able to make it in Phoenix, Arizona. Well, he made it as the voice of the Sun since 1972, but we're not here to talk about basketball, nor are we here to talk about broadcasting. We're here to talk about you and your career as a jazz pianist. How did it begin?
Well, obviously, probably the two most important things in my life growing up was then radio, broadcasting, and music. I started playing piano as a kid, took some lessons.
Who was your first teacher?
My first teacher I didn't like, and I only took for a short time and quit. And then several years later, the principal at a high school nearby that I knew said that his wife also taught, and that she taught you to play popular music as well. So I found that exciting, and I started taking with her. And then I think I was maybe 14 or 15 and living on a farm outside of Williams, Iowa, and there was a knock on the door. And the guy said, does Al McCoy live here? My mother said yes. He said, I'd like to talk to him. He introduced himself. His name was Jimmy Dunlap. He said, I've got the band at the local VFW club called Jimmy Dunlap and the Collegians, and we need a piano player.
How old were you?
I think 14 or 15 at that time. And he said, we play Wednesday through Saturday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Come over Wednesday night, and if you can cut it, you know, you've got a job. So I thought, well, gee, I don't know anything about this, you know. And in those days in Iowa, in those private clubs, they had slot machines and everything. And so I went over Wednesday night, and I guess I cut it because I got the job. And
they give you charts? Did they give
yeah,
you
yeah. That was my first professional job, and I joined the union at that time. And I think scale was like $7 a night, as I recall. But
this
that
was
was
the
my first
local
job.
in Williams?
No, this actually was also in Webster City. The union was in Fort Dodge, and the band included, I think it was five or six piece band, and we played, you know, in towns of the Moose, the Elks, the Legion, the Amvets, the
90%
PFW.
of the staff here, when I said you were coming in, they said, oh, you're going to be talking about the Sun season tonight, so we're going to be talking about his career as a jazz pianist. And 90% of them said, I had no idea. So why is it that was never your career? Because you loved it.
Yeah, well, going on, as I said, I played with that band through high school, and then just as I was going to college at Drake, I got an offer to go with a territory band in Minnesota.
What does that mean now?
I still have the
territory
letter.
Band.
A territory band means you played Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Dakotas, that territory. You traveled,
and what
a lot of times on buses. And the letter offered me a job, and I think it paid $40 or $45 a week. And it said when we're on the road, we do pay your room rent for the hotel.
Was that the answer to the question why you did not make it a career?
Well, almost. But then I decided I was going to Drake, so I didn't do that. Well, my first year at Drake, I meet a guy in a class, and we start talking about music, and he said, oh, I'm working with Eddie Allen's band from Ames, and he needs a piano player. All right, here we go again. So it just kind of built itself that piano players were kind of scarce commodities for some reason, and I continued to play. And I played for bands all the time I was going to college, as well as working in radio. But music was certainly a big part of it, and it became a part of helping me pay the tuition in those days also.
And by the way, I get to say this. He's terrific. He's terrific. Contemporary piano, now fabulous musician. But I want to know who the musicians were and are that you idolize.
Well, I have to tell you, probably the piano player that I idolized the most was Oscar Peterson. He just is so fantastic. He was just had everything going musically. And even late in his life, when he was originally from Canada and lived there, he had a stroke. And he could only play with his left hand. He played more with one hand than most guys could with everything working for them. But he was one of my favorites. And of course, Errol Garner, I loved his style. Used to go to the London House in Chicago and listen to Errol Garner. George Shearing I liked. I liked most of those type piano players.
What about venues? It was at one time a consistent thing for jazz fans that if you went to a city of any consequence at all, there was always a jazz club. I mean, it was the jazz club, and it was Birdland in New York.
No question.
The Blue Note in Chicago. What's your favorite?
Well, I like the Blue Note, although I went to the original Birdland, but the Blue Note, because Chicago's always been one of my favorite cities, and I actually worked there as a musician at one time, and the Blue Note in Chicago was one of my favorites. I mentioned the London House in Chicago because they always had the great piano players there, Errol Garner, Oscar Peterson.
Did you ever get to play with a really big name?
No. As far as bands, Clyde McCoy.
Oh.
Although no relation at all.
No, but you got to play.
Yeah, it just so happens that he was coming into Des Moines to play the Tromar Ballroom. His piano player was ill and didn't make their trip. He was working out of Denver at that time, and the secretary of the Musicians Union in Des Moines, the undescribable Sandy Dalzell, with a Chicago cigar in his mouth, saying, "Hey kid, do you want to work tonight?" He said, "See Clyde McCoy at the Tromar." So that was, I played Sugar Blues about 10 times that night, I think.
Well, you know what? Whether it's a ball game and a horn tells you that it's the end of the game, or whether it's the last dance at the end of an evening of great ballroom music, we've come to the end of this. I need to know from you, though. Pick one. If you could make the same money, substantial money, be successful in sports broadcasting, playing music, or playing rock and roll, as you did on the radio for a long time at Crux. Pick one.
Well, anymore, I just play for therapy. I say I'm an intermission piano player at best. But I think one thing everybody dreams about in the heyday of the big bands, to be the big band singer. The Ray Eberleys, the Bob Eberleys, you know, getting the Sinatras, getting up with the Pied Pipers or the Montanaires. Wouldn't have been a bad way to go, Pat.
An Al McCoy that you never knew in your life. And Shazam, isn't it terrific to find out? On things like this, for example, Pat's personal portraits on KTAR.com.